Hello, book lovers. Welcome back to another edition of our book club with me and Marisa Serafini, where each month we select a book to read. We go into it in depth. So, yes, there will be spoilers. And then we also fill you in on stuff we've been reading outside of our curriculum, if you will. And then we, of course, preview what we will be reading so you can join us for the future. As always, we invite you to read along with us, comment, let us know what you're reading as well. We love all that stuff. So, um, this month, for the month of August, we read Elder Race by Adrian Tchaikovsky, and it is a science fiction novella. It's about 200 pages, even less than that, and yeah, so that's what we sort of read. Like it comes, we'll talk about it more in the reception, but it's a highly rated book and things of that nature. So I was like, all right, let's give this a whirl. But Marissa, from your perspective, what did you think?
Overall, I like the pace. It was, like I said, it's a very quick read, less than 200 pages barely. Um, and then like I did like the fact that when you're reading it, yes, it's another book about colonization, but also like just like passed on generations and passed on behavioral traits, mental traits, language from like a previous generation to current generation, because like that's how people like human race has evolved, and like everything we do now, is it relevant to the people who were there millions of years ago, hundreds of thousands of years ago? And then you're like, so, and because things get translated and transmuted so often throughout all the years, now you just question like what's real and what's not, depending on like lost languages, messages get, just lost in translation. It's like it makes you question how people think and act compared to like their former generations. And it's like, what's real? And like that really made me think at the end of this book. And I like that. I was like, it was ambiguous, but also like, yeah, that's kind of where we are, like how just, people have evolved from other people, and just like, yeah, what's relevant and what's not anymore.
Yeah, I mean it's a very simple plot overall. It basically bounces back and forth between the two main characters, Lynn and Nyr. They both share the middle letter as Y, so they have that in common, and only three letters each, at least their nicknames. And Lynn is from essentially like medieval times, castles and that kind of stuff. So you think you're getting a fantasy element, but then you flip over to the side of Nur, and really all the fantasy elements of this entire book can be explained via science. You know? So that's kind of the interesting part about it, and whatnot. And yeah, to your point about understanding, what's real, what's not. I don't think we have that, as far as this book, we don't have that disconnect where we're like cave people and someone brings in a computer, but we live in an age of AI now where it's like, okay, unless I was literally there, and even then, I don't know if I should believe it. Like it's that kind of realm that we're entering. And so it was kind of poignant in that way to think about.
Right, but it's also very realistic too, because like that's what we deal with now. And I hate to bring religion into this, and separate the church and science, but like it's very realistic because like we have a scientific aspect of this man who's like telling everything statistically, scientifically in that way that makes us as a reader understand one perspective. And then another person who was like raised on like past stories and past like experiences compared to like data. And then but I was like, that's how we are in today's society. Is like, and I had to bring it up, it's like the Bible. There's so many different perspectives in the Bible that is like things are written, we know people were in the past and they wrote it down, but again, through language, through text and translation, things get changed, things get misconcepted. um and also, especially when you come to the New Testament, when you have like witnesses of Jesus and like all the apostles, and they have like contradicting, stories of the exact same event. And you're like, so what's real, what's not? compared to the people who were actually there witnessing it to what's written on the text, that's the only thing that has survived over all these years compared to the original people who were there. So it's like, what do we, and that comes down to the people, like what we believe in is like, do you believe the written text that was left as evidence, or do you believe the stories that was told to you? That was probably like the whole idea of a telephone. The original message and story is probably different from what you actually heard. So it's like, what's real? What's not? And then, like, we see it in today, and it's definitely realistic in this book.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's interesting, kind of looking at it from that angle, right? So essentially, Lynn calls upon Nyr to save, because he's like viewed upon as a wizard. So there's something ravaging, these people. They're poor, so nothing's really going to be done about it. But Lynn wants to make a name for herself, so there's an ego side to it. But she also kind of wants to do some good, and so she thinks this guy can help. Turns out it's a virus that's essentially killing people, and through Nyr's science methodology, they're able to quote unquote eradicate it or whatever else, right? But I think the true sense of it, of like what's real and what's not, is the idea that human connection is the real part. So regardless of like what is the truth, it's like they, by the end of the book, have this kinship, and where Nyr was trying to stay kind of away from this civilization, he's like, no, you know what? Like, regardless of where I am, regardless of how I'm viewed and whatever the disconnect might be, the human emotion side will remain, and you have to use that as the basis of the truth.
Right. Because no matter how much we have evolved, like human species to human creature species is like we still, like you said, that need for connection. So like even you take away all the science, there's still like a level of like help me. I don't care how you use it, whether it be your scientific data or like religious practice or beliefs and stuff. It's like something is wrong with all of us. We need to fix this. And that's when we see society like have their trouble of delineating and separating their beliefs and values just to get the ends like as a means to an end, you know? And that's
Yeah,
why so many people go against each other because they can't set aside their values and differences because they're so trained in one way.
exactly. So if nothing else, it's this odd sort of viewpoint of just be present, right? Regardless of what you think you may know or may not know, if you kind of just let it go, then you're in the moment. And so, not to say like the truth doesn't matter, but you will be guided, to a greater truth, if you will, right? So that's the kind of, I mean, it's a very oddly aspirational viewpoint, when you kind of view it in those terms, at least. So,
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think it's like the point where their own beliefs and their system and whatever methods that they were using trying to figure this out wasn't working, so they had to reach out to another perspective to help solve an issue,
but
thinking outside the box, if you will.
yeah, but ultimately they needed each other, right? So Nur is this person that, he has a reputation because in the past he helped, right? Centuries ago, he stepped in when he wasn't supposed to, but he took a liking, and so that was his motivation. Then he kind of swore off, like, okay, I can't be involved. So he suppresses everything that he can. And now, because of the legendary status that is built up, as you're talking about over centuries, um, they call upon him to do this. But in the end, it's the combination of the two main characters. I don't think one can do it without the other. You know what I mean? Like she has
Right.
her bravery and her unrelenting idea that this can be done, and he has the technology to be able to pull it off.
Right. And like there is symbiotic nature that they have to exist with each other. They have to coexist in that way. And like that's what takes them a while to get to. They're like, no, like you said, we need each other. We need to work together to figure this out. And I think that that's the whole thing with um Nyr's perspective is like he's witnessed all this. He knows the originality, or he knows what it used to be like, but then he himself pulled back, and he's just witnessing everything happening. And now they're like going back to him for his wisdom, basically. He's like, yeah, I decided to sit on the sidelines and let all you flounder, basically. And I get it. I was like, that's how like future, like past generations look upon like this current generation and like who's really right and who's really wrong. And it's like, yeah, we think like millennials think Gen Alphas and Gen Zers are cringe. So the kids say these days, but it's like, yeah, we see these beliefs get passed down from generation to generation. We're just witnessing others and we think that they're idiots, and they're really not. We're all same human beings at the end of the day. We just look at things differently.
Yeah, 100%. And I thought one of the kind of oddly tragic characters was the criminal that, knows the path and knows where to lead them, right? And he's trying to essentially atone for being a deserter, if you will. And I thought he was a great catalyst towards them kind of coming to their own realizations on a lot of stuff. What did you think about him as a character?
Sorry, which character? The
Uh,
the
all were,
Oh,
I think
all
the
were.
criminal.
Yeah, yeah. I like the fact that like yes, like we've been saying before, like he used to be a certain way. He also and people see him as a certain way too. And then like once they started getting to know him, they called him a different name, like his full name, I believe, right? Um, they called him All, and then it was actually All were. So just like it's like once we get to know people, then they're able to be like, yeah, you're not just one thing, you're multiple things. Like you don't just fit into one box. And I like that. Like, was he really a criminal, or was he just deemed a criminal because you don't really know his true nature? Didn't know what he used to be like. Just like one thing about his entire life, but you don't know his entire life. And that like you're the one black mark in your life shouldn't like define you. And I think that's like what I got out of it is like, no, maybe he's not just a criminal. Maybe he's just a normal human being too, or just a normal person like everybody else.
Yeah, and I think that was his struggle, was kind of society's definition of him, right? Like he wanted to do better. He wanted to get past that, but it's like society wouldn't let him get past that. And so you start to almost self-doubt of, okay, well, if everyone else says that I am as such, then okay, maybe I am that, and whatever, worthless, not deserving, yada, yada, yada.
Right. And then I think that's where like the self intrusive thoughts becomes because like we do it today in society. It's like when we see like prisoners being released and they're trying to actually like fix their life and make their lives better for the future and stuff. And people are like, oh, what's your criminal history? I was like, you're once a criminal, you're always a criminal. I'm like, no, no. They did something in the past, but that doesn't define what they're doing now in their current life. And like, unfortunately, it's like that black spot on their record in their life is like, you'll always be labeled as a criminal and you'll be nothing more than that. And then you keep getting told those messages and beliefs over and over again. Those people are just going to think at the end of the day, like, yeah, I am just a criminal. Even though I'm trying to make amends and trying to better my life, at the end of the day, I'm still a criminal. And that's terrible. And like, I think it's very terrible that our society doesn't give like, yeah, we give second chances, but like we're always stuck like labeling people. And this, unfortunately, this criminal, he's just trying to like live his life.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the book is about language for sure, but it is interesting to me, also just kind of tangentially within our society. There's both the good labeling and the bad labeling. Like we want to be able to define ourselves, and also take agency of like, okay, I am X, Y, and Z. But in an odd way, I almost like rail against that of like, well, at the end of the day, a chair is still a chair no matter what you call it. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, in a way, like I think, um, yeah, I don't know. I don't know how to fully perhaps express it, but like I would love to live in a labelless world where everyone's just like, okay, you just are what you are. You know, if you like playing soccer, it doesn't mean you have to be like quote unquote now just a soccer player or, whatever else, right? Like it's just cool. That's what you like and you do that. Cool. you know?
Right. And that's the beauty of humankind and just like evolution in and of itself. We're not just one thing. We fit several boxes. We check several check boxes off the list of society. It's like you can't just be labeled to one thing. And life is not just black and white. And that's what they're still kind of stuck in that mentality of like, oh, you're a criminal, you're this, you're that, you're a scientist, you're a magician, you're a wizard. And like, no, we're all different kinds of things. We're not just one thing. And I think that's the thing that's the habit that couldn't break.
Yeah, and certainly, I mean, the whole driving force for Lynn as the main character is that, she's the fourth daughter, aka the worthless one, because who the hell cares about the
Mm-hmm.
fourth daughter in the lineage? And so as I said, kind of at the top, there's that ego drive to it. Um, but yet, the more and more she discovers and seeing people in pain and what this virus has ultimately caused, she's trying to do the right thing, maybe for slightly not the best reason, but she is ultimately like, I think the good wins out because she's like, no, like this is wrong. And if no one else is going to do it, then I got to help.
Right. She actually has a conscious and it has the motivation and the effort to do actively do something about it. And like even though she's the fourth daughter and like no one it's like the middle child. No one cares about the middle child, you know? So she's like, well, you know what? If you guys aren't gonna pay attention to me and not do anything, at least I'm gonna try to do something on my own. And like good for her. We need more people like that. Like the self-motivation that doesn't let other people's like external thoughts about them bother her. And like, no, she took the initiative. She was the one who actively went out and looked for someone who could have helped her. She was the one who thought outside the box, outside the black and white. We're like, hey, we need another perspective on this to figure out what the hell's going on with this virus.
Yeah. And so in a way, like she overcame her programming, if you will, right? Like whatever the limits of it were, she managed to surpass them and in turn inspire Nyr to get past his programming of, okay, I have to just sit here, do nothing, like my job is this. It seems like the most
Mm-hmm.
boring job. Like no one else is alive, but I got to do my job and keep sending messages back to Earth, even though Earth has, for all he knows, just died.
It's just gone now. It's like, what's the point? It's like fishing, you just keep sending it out there and wonder if you're just sending it into an obsolete abyss. Um, yeah, and I think that's gotta be a tough place to be in too. Like he's doing his job just because of like that's what he had been programmed to do. But also just like the mere thought is like, what's the point of all doing all this? And this woman is making me do something other than what I'm used to in my everyday life. Oh, all right. Like let's work with her. Because she's changing up my life. Like I like that too, because he's actually one of the only people who have seen the differences between the generations from like the original human race to like the current race. And I was just like, yeah, and he's witnessed everything that's gone bad. And now he's like, oh no, something's happening. If I don't speak up, who will? If I don't act out, who's going to? Because no one else is around anymore. So I gotta help save. I gotta help save everybody.
Yeah, and one of the things I want to talk about is the dissociative cognitive cognition system, the DCS. Uh,
DCS, yeah.
so this is something that he utilizes quite often in the book. Um, it's essentially a way to suppress his emotions, right? And he seems to have a lot of emotions that he needs to suppress.
Oh my God, I know. And
So,
I mean, like, and that's what I loved about this part because, like once it's like humans are meant to have emotions as much as we hate dealing with them. Trust me, I'm a Cancerian. Like we're one of the emotional motherfuckers out there. It's like as much as uncomfortable it is to deal with their emotions, we have to deal with our emotions. We have to face them to get through conflicts in life, to problem solve, to all this. And his thing, that's like the DCS, that's like the ultimate compartmentalization like that turned off his consciousness of like what's good and what's bad, and like what he's supposed to be feeling just so he could do his job every day. It's like, no, 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 you got to be a human. You can't let a machine turn off your feelings. It's like you got to face all of this. That's what makes life. It's not just doing, it's feeling.
And also
So
too,
once he
like,
started feeling, he started becoming to like solving issues again.
yeah, because I mean, at the end of the day, I almost find it like matter cannot be destroyed nor created. So in terms of like emotion, right? It's like it's this thing might be suppressing it, but it's not like doing anything with it, right? And so at the end of the day, in terms of how we as humans deal with our emotion, something has to like it has to go somewhere, it has to be used for something, right? And this is just completely like almost like jam packing it more and
That's
more
what
and
he's
more.
doing. And this is what I've been learning in my therapy because it's so fucking true. It's that it's like we repress our emotions so much. We dampen it down, dampen it down, dampen it down. It's like, I don't want to deal with this. I'm gonna put it in a box and put it in a lid on it. And you think you're suppressing it, but really you're repressing it, and you're repressing it so much to the point it becomes depression. So there's the difference between depression and repression. And then he's been doing this for God knows how long, like centuries, centuries. And now it's all coming out. It's like the Pandora's box, you know? He's finally feeling his emotions. Like, this is what you were supposed to be dealing with the entire time. But you just put it in a box and called it the DCS and like didn't deal with it. But now that you're dealing with it, oh, now we're seeing results. That makes sense.
Yeah,
Now you're facing your emotions and now you're making progress.
indeed. And that's what led to his ultimate change. Um, so overall, a very simplistic story. Um,
Very heady. I wouldn't say simplistic, very heady. I was like, I texted you afterwards. I was like, what? Is it because it made me think it's very ambiguous, it's very true to life. And like, and I understand the importance of colonization, but also like as humans, we need to feel shit. We need to face our shit and face our emotions, deal with our emotions, therefore go out and actually fix our behavior. And like, it doesn't matter what the previous people did in front of you, is you're doing what you're doing now in the present day. Doesn't matter like the centuries above you who like don't even matter anymore, because like, yeah, you want to like pay homage to them in your history, but like they don't matter anymore. They're not currently affecting your present day. So you have to deal with your stuff now and not worry about what people are thinking about you from centuries ago. They don't matter anymore. They're dead.
well, that's the joke of like tradition is trying to appease a bunch of dead people.
Exactly. Exactly. Why? Why? Why are we still like allowing boomers to like mess with the millennial mentality? Like, why are the millennials like so hard on the Gen Alphas? It's like you see this generational pass down of how we think about the next generation. How we was like, no, that doesn't. Are we affecting them? No. Are they truly affecting us? No. We just got to deal with our own stuff right now. That's right in front of us.
There you go.
People's
So what
others' opinions don't matter. They really don't.
so what questions did you have as far as the book was concerned that we want to unpack?
Well, I think it was like the one chapter that was like quite honestly very confusing for me, but it took like two, three times to read it through. I was like, oh, that's the format. Because it switches formats. And when he's relaying the history, quote unquote history of the humans, moving over to the new world, and then her interpretation of what he's saying. Again, with the language misinterpretation, mistranslating. And like, oh, okay, his is very scientific, research based, factual based. This was what happened. This is what happened. People moved on. People like we went on a ship. We traveled, and then like the current generation is the one that lived right now. We had to train them to have a different type of behavior on this new colony, this new world, which is completely different from the original people that who were first on the original trip and stuff. And so it's like, and then even now, this new race on this new world, because of the atmosphere is different, the creatures are different. It's not just humans. Humans are hybrids now. We have like coexisted with the new environment around, and like there are hybrid creatures now, there are hybrid marriages now. I'm like, yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's like everything we do now has no relevance to what or like everything like the centuries ago has no relevance to like what they're doing now on the colony. And I'm just like, what matters anymore? It's like you could be told to do one thing one way, but once you actually get there out in the field, it could like all that could go out the window and it doesn't matter anymore, you know?
Yeah, I mean it's yeah, that's an interesting chapter because we've been going back and forth from the different perspectives, but it's the first chapter that's literally written in like two columns. So
Yeah. And
it's
then I learned like you have to read the left column first because that's his perspective. Then you have to read the right column. But like it covers 3 pages, and so you have to go back again and go back to the beginning. I
yeah.
was like, I
No.
read this 3 times, and like I like to think I'm a smart person, but like reading this is like first you have to read this column, switch the page, read it again, keep going because it goes another page. And then once you're done with that, then you have to freaking go back 3 pages and start all over and read the right page. What the hell, Phil? Like, come on. Bucks, why are you changing the perspective of even reading the book format now? And I was so confused. So confused. I'm like,
Listen,
why?
you would
Why are you throwing this curveball at me in the middle of the fucking book? Oh,
I
my brain hurts so much thinking so hard on this.
I guess we will never read Infinite Jest or House of Leaves or any postmodern
Please,
book.
no, no, because like I'm already spiraling, still trying to think about the message of this book, but not how realistic it is. And I'm like, but I don't want to read another book that like it throws curveballs at me like that. I'm like, no, that's not fun.
Well,
That's not fun.
I think in Patch Adams, there's a quote where Robin Williams, as Patch Adams, makes the doctors very much want to just essentially not have a doctor-patient relationship. And he makes the argument, transference is inevitable. And that's kind of, in a sense, like what this book is in all about, where, as you're talking about initially, like they were much more involved and they were kind of pushing colonies forward and not just, the civilization, but the environment and animals, plants, and everything. And then it was like, okay, we're going to step back. And it's like, okay, well, A, the transference already happened, but B, by you being here, like, again, as that quote goes, transference is inevitable. So it just, you have to, rather than shy away from it, just start to actually embrace it.
Yeah, deal with it and like move with the changes, go with the flow. And that's what they didn't like the previous generations, centuries ago, didn't teach people how to evolve. It's like it's always has to be this way. But once they got into the field, they're like, oh, it's not this way. This is the best way to survive it. It's like I forget what you just told me. I'm gonna do it this way because this I find this means more effective.
Yeah. And that's the interesting, like, no matter what technology like separates, one generation to, now him as like the quote unquote wizard, at the end of the day, they still have the same issues, right? Like it's that age old thing. Uh, worries, wants, concerns, like it's all there, just different. You know what I mean?
Right.
So that's the kind of interesting aspect that the book raises as well, is that ultimately the human side will remain the human side, no matter what technology exists.
Right.
So
And I think that's what we could probably take away is like some things will still be consistent. Human primal need, emotions still consistent, but the world around you changes, is constantly evolving. So you have to adapt to your surroundings, become your surroundings more so. It's like you're changing with the world, but the world's also changing around you. So it's just like, but the human aspects will still remain the same within an ever-changing world. It's like it's a weird, vicious cycle that we all get into, but people can't see both ways. People
yeah,
can't see black and white.
no, they cannot. Any other questions you had besides that one chapter, before we dive into the background of good old Adrian?
No, that's basically well, I loved how they they misinterpret that like the one where at near the end of the book where they misinterpret like creature and demon. Like, what do you think demon means to you? What have you been told? What demon, evil creatures mean to you? And just like again with the mistranslation and misconception of language throughout the years, is like, yeah, wizard is a different word compared to an actual scientist, but people thought he was a wizard because he knew a certain type of knowledge. It's like, yeah, what's really true based on like what you understand and what you can comprehend compared to what's been told. And you're like, oh, right, this is why we need each other. We need each other to talk things out and understand things better.
Yeah. Well, it's like that quote from Men in Black, centuries ago, people believed the world was flat. I forget exactly how it goes, but he says like all the stuff that we like knew for certain, and he's like, and look at you, yesterday you knew that aliens did not live among us, and now look at us in real life. Apparently, there's aliens. There may not be. I don't know, but
Right. Those are great movies, and I actually rewatched all three of those very recently. So like that's a great analogy. Like we're constantly evolving. One thing is not always one thing.
indeed. All right. Well, as far as Adrian's background, so he was born in 1972, Polish descent. You could probably tell by his last name. And he loves the natural world, right? So he's very much fascinated from there. In fact, he studied zoology and psychology at the University of Reading, um, but then he went on to study to be a lawyer. So he was like a legal executive and stuff like that. And he took up writing in 2008. Or actually, sorry, his first foray into writing was in 1996 with various short stories and stuff like that. And then he started to get published in about 2008 with some of his books. And then in 2018 is when he became a full-time writer. So there you have that. And his most known work is Shadows of the Apt and Children of Time series. So, which if like if you're listening and you're enjoying kind of what the themes of this are, this is like from what I understand, a very short snippet of like what Children of Time deals with. There's colonization, there's AI insemination into like people and to try to modify them and this, and so it sounds pretty intriguing, especially if you're vibing with what we're talking about here in terms of elder race. So would
I
recommend.
see. I admit I've never read him. When I first heard the name Tchaikovsky, I immediately thought of the Russian composer because that's the only Tchaikovsky I know. And so I was like, oh, interesting. All right, cool. And then of course, like I had that moment, was like, oh yeah, dumber. So other people can have the same last name too and not be the same person. So I was like thoroughly pleased to first read about this Tchaikovsky, a different version. And I was like, oh yeah, I can like I loved how he did touch upon like the human emotions. Like that part was very realistic. Um, that we have to coexist with each other and just touching upon like people needing each other. I like that. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
true.
Yeah, so I mean, I stumbled onto it because I was looking up, fantasy novels that also dealt with sci-fi elements, and this book was very well received. So it was nominated for the Hugo Award for Best Novella in 2022. Um, it's sold well. It called it a master of, they call him a master of the genre mashup. So yeah, just really well received. And again, because of his series, Children of Time, people were kind of excited for this. And in an odd way, you can almost see the influences of COVID in some sense, because like it's the virus is coming and it's attacking people, right?
Hmm.
Not that it's like deals with it, it's very tangential to the whole story, but I thought I could see the spark of it all in there, you know.
Right.
So, um, but yeah, so that's kind of the background of everything. Any final thoughts before we move on to our next segment of what we've been reading?
Uh, no, other than like it made me think a lot, so I appreciate that. Because even I texted you at the end, I was like, "What?" I'm thinking so hard to understand this. So, yeah, no, I like the fact that's like put aside your differences, work with each other, and in the end, you'll get a result. And if the world could work like that, it'd be a better world.
Yeah, and I like discovering new authors, you know. Again, I'm kind of curious to read some of his other works, but because you know, I've done the typical like Neil Gaiman, Philip K. Dick, Neil Stevenson, you know, even like we've done William Gibson. So yeah, I just like seeing how different people approach different aspects of it all.
Yeah.
So. All right. That does it for Elder Race. It's a short book, but a very, very thought-provoking book. So let's talk about what we've been reading. Do you want to start us off?
Yeah, well, quite honestly, August has been a bit kind of been a busy month. I was in the middle of reading Neverwhere by Neil Gaiman, and then unfortunately I had a conversation with you, and then you kind of opened my eyes to the fact that he's now part of cancel culture. I'm like, God damn it.
The
So I
book is
immediately
still good. I'm
you
not
know, well,
saying
you know what?
that, you
Like,
know.
I got halfway through the book, and quite honestly, I thought it was boring. And then I had that conversation with you with about he's not in a great place right now, so I returned the book back to the library. So I didn't finish it, but I got two other books that are I'm actually more looking forward to read. Because like before the coffee gets cold, um, yeah, it's like supposed to be just be feel good. And you know, I'm a big coffee reader. And when breath becomes air, this is a really good one about, you know, the just, you know, the need to survive on like a person helping each other, like his whole life was like medicine and like helping each other. And then ironically, he's now fighting for his own life and medicine and stuff. So it's like yeah, just the nature of survival and like what's important in life and stuff like that. So that's another emotionally heavier story. So
Yeah,
that's currently on my docket.
right on. Well, I finished The Dragon Republic, which is book two of the Poppy War trilogy. So that was the Poppy War being literally the first book that we've ever done. Um, and yeah, I
So
know
good.
you've read. We'll do a bonus episode where we talk about the Dragon Republic, and then when I finish the Burning God, we'll talk about that one as well as another bonus episode. But yeah, I think you know I told you I held off on it for number one. It's a dark series.
It is. It really is.
And you know, she's a great writer, so like there's an odd jealousy. Like you know, I mean, she was still in college when she wrote what I think is on par, if not better than like Lord of the Rings, you know?
Yeah.
And then she just switched genres and continues to write like she's got five books out at the moment. And so younger than me, and look at all that she's managed to write. So like if she literally just did this trilogy, kudos, you're done, life complete. But she
Yeah,
still
seriously.
continues writing, and again, in different genres and crushing it. So, but yeah, this one, it's more fantasy, doesn't have sci-fi elements, but yeah, it is like whatever trigger warning you want to think of, it applies.
Yeah, and I think it also, I mean, we could probably save it for our discussion, but also it shows she does a great job of establishing characters, but also being like very active with these characters. They're not like Lord of the Rings where they're walking around for two books just waiting for something to happen, you know. They're actively going out and seeking strategically planning. Who do they talk to? Who do they make allies with? You know, there's like everyone in the book is actively doing something. And I
Yes,
think that's what keeps the pace of the book going.
very much
So
so.
yeah, it's very
Indeed.
complex, but everyone plays their part. So,
Indeed. All right. So, what do we have to look forward to as far as our reading list?
well, I think I'm just gonna call it now. I'll call it Audible. So I'll decide what our next book is September. It was gonna be Vengeance, a story about, you know, Israelis and Palestinians, during 1970s Olympics. I think that's, it's still very, relevant because the Olympics just happened. The Summer Olympics of 2024 just happened. So, but like that conflict is still going on in the world, and I thought it'd be good for us to read. But I think we need a more happier story to read.
Sure.
The last few books have been pretty heavy. So I'm going to find us a happy story. So maybe we'll save it for another time. But yeah, I think I'm going to call an audible and find us something happy. So I'll let you know. Well, the next discussion will be a big surprise.
All right. Well, then you have Near to the Wild Heart by Clarice Lispector. That's October. We're doing that. And that's if you like Jane Eyre and those types of books, that's what I'm told. It's kind of in the vein of, so fingers crossed that it ends up being. And then I do have as of now, you don't have anything for November, right?
No,
Okay.
sorry, Phil. I was like, well, I'm 2 books right now, but not into 2 months kind of mentality thinking. I was like, I'll eventually think of things for us.
All right. Well, it's not a holiday themed book, but it's called Hollow Kingdom. So this is for December. Kira Jane Buxton. And let me just read you so it was chosen as a book of the year by NPR and Good Housekeeping. And here's the short little blurb, not the full summary, just the short little blurb. A foul-mouthed crow and a faithful bloodhound must band together to save humanity in this bright-eyed, boundlessly beautiful romp through the apocalyptic world that comes after. So hopefully no colonization, okay?
We'll see.
It's supposed to be really fun. It takes place in Seattle. It's about a crow and a dog, okay? Crow and a dog.
Okay, good. I was like, well, that makes sense. Seattle's important to you. So, all right. I'll be open-minded about that one. Okay,
So,
good.
yes. And if for some reason they start colonizing things, we'll abandon.
I'll just throw the book out the freaking window and be like, do another one, find another book.
So, yes. So that's what we've got coming up. So yeah, that does it for this episode. Keep tuning in. Like I said, we're going to do a bonus episode of the Dragon Republic and then eventually the Burning God. But in the meantime, where can people follow along on your reading adventures?
Everyone can follow me at Serafini TV.
Awesome. And I'm at Phil Svitek, and we'll see you next time.